a couple lots. And so in a development the size of Seaver Crop with 100 homes, we would be able to buy a couple lots there with that amount of money. And so the system development charges is not the solution to everything there. It will help with the cost, but we need to come up with other ideas in order to acquire land. And there's other ideas with grant money and other agencies coming to the table, and also with developing our Parks and Recreation multi-jurisdictional Parks and Recreation plan that I mentioned, with being able to have the tools in order to make sure that developers are putting aside park space and trail space. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next question is, how will the new school be funded? Can anyone speak to that?
You know, I can a little bit. I'm on the School District Financial Advisory Committee and on their budget committee, and I sent some questions to Dan Goldman, the school superintendent. And they also do a planning process, and they just finished a 20-year facilities master plan last year. And they use the same population growth numbers that the city is using for its planning. So the school district also proactively plans for growth. They know they're going to grow. The things that they're doing in the short term is, you know, they're building a new school at May Street that'll have 160 more kids than the existing school. Once that school is built, they're likely to adjust some boundaries. They will eventually need to build a new school. And I think that's probably more, maybe even in like the 15 or 20 year time frame. Something that's not very well known is, even though our population has been growing, our school population has been shrinking. So we have 50 fewer kids this year than we did 2 years ago. We've lost about 25 a year. We don't really know the reason for it. There's some sort of anecdotal evidence that the people who are moving into the new houses are wealthier retired people versus families with young kids. So right now, we don't need a new school because our school district is actually shrinking. But when we do need a new school, this is a long answer to a short question, it'll be funded the way schools are always funded, which is by a school bond measure. I've never seen a new school built any other way.
Thank you. Next question is, will the rest of the city's roads be upgraded to accommodate for the growth of the Westside plan? Can anyone speak to that?
I think that's a city infrastructure question.
Yeah,
come on August 16th.
Good point. What ways can you ensure that affordable housing will go to those who really need it? I know a few of you spoke to that and ideas that you had.
Oh boy, that's what everyone wants to know. That in particular, the houses we're building and probably selling for under market value, are we going to sell them to investors or people that want to use them as renters or second home buyers? We pretty much, I can just speak for our developments, and I'll give you an example of the development we're doing out on Belmont right now. We went to the school district and asked them to send out an email to try to get a response from teachers on who needed a new house, and we got, I think we got 40 teachers. That local teachers, families that needed homes, and we've got, and 15 of them are pre-approved, and as soon as we get them built, they'll be in the houses. And if one of those, what? 25. Okay, 25. Greg does our numbers. So unless some of those teachers are undercover investors or something, that's the best we can do.
Right.
So for our developers, I mentioned we often work with deed restrictions that both require us to target a certain income level, but also guarantee that we're going to check every year on income eligibility. And so the developments that Mid-Columbia Housing Authority works through and Columbia Cascade Housing typically have a lot of compliance, both at the onset of getting folks into the homes, but also ongoing. I think one of the exciting things for me that we have an opportunity to explore, in part, there's been some local efforts to generate more local revenue specifically for affordable housing so that we can be more flexible in the tools than what we've had in the past. And an exciting opportunity I'm looking forward to seeing if we can do within the community is what's called a community land trust model. So not just where we're having long-term affordable options for folks that are renters, but how can we tap that for homeowners and into the future. And again, I'm interested in more than just a first generation affordability, but how do we pass that affordability on beyond just the first time home buyer, and what does that look like 20 years down the road? It's complex, but I think the timing's right for us to really be exploring that, and I'm excited to see that, again, the city and the county are really looking to generate some local revenue sources to be able to take on some of those innovative approaches to solving the housing challenges we have.
And just piggybacking on that, probably a question for the developers as well. How can you have design standards enforced if you have higher density with more affordable choices? I know, Mike,
Well,
your forte.
that's part of the PUD process. Architectural standards they look at what we do and they don't let us build. I mean, we could build a much less expensive house, just, T111 and single story and the slam bam, but we have to put, they have overhangs and certain trim details and roof pitch. I mean, there's quite a few things that they require us to do in our to get through the PUD process. And I don't have a problem with it. I would do that anyway. I'd like a nicer looking house that I can drive by and be proud of. Was that the question, or is that? Okay.
One thing that I think would be useful in the Westside plan is the PUD process that Mike uses takes 18 months to 2 years to do. There's a lot of cost involved with doing it because it's a very discretionary, slow land use process. Because he wants to do special things. He wants to add more density than is generally allowed. So it makes the length of time it takes to do it makes it very expensive, which he adds to the prices of his homes. If he could, by right, just the way you do a normal single-family home, build a home on a 2,500 square foot lot, it had all the design standards as the PUD, but he could just walk in and in a month get a permit. He could probably take, I don't know, $5,000, something off the $10,000 off the price of a house just by having a faster, more streamlined process.
Well, just to follow up on that, Bend actually has the planning department, the building department, and Bend guarantee if you come in with a demonstrably affordable housing permit to build an affordable house, they guarantee a 1 week turnaround. So they'll put everything else off to the side and they'll put yours through and you guarantee you'll have it back in a week. That can't always work, but just to give you an example of something that can work.
Right.
That's getting off subject a little too.
No. It's a question probably for everybody up here. Why can we not just say no to development? Fight for the microphone.
I've missed this in my introduction. We are desperately trying to buy a house right now, under $400,000. So if anybody knows of anything in the May Street district, please tell us. Money will conquer all, and if there's empty land, somebody is going to buy that land and put whatever they want there. And so I appreciate the thoughtfulness in putting together a plan so we have more housing that fits the needs of all the residents.
Yeah, I'd almost say that that's an unfair question to ask because I had lots of us came here in the 80s and 90s and were able to afford a home here without it, because it was much more affordable. And I'm not about to be the one to tell a young family that they can't live in Hood River. I don't think that's fair at all. And on another vein, you may get the next Andy Von Floto that wants to come here, and whether you like drones or not, but he came here to windsurf in 1990 and started Hood Tech and started in situ, and I mean that's an immense amount of jobs. And there's the next entrepreneur, the next person that brings jobs. There's millions of examples of that, not millions, but dozens and dozens of people that have come here, tried to figure out how to stay here, opened businesses, started businesses, restaurants, you name it. And everyone knows of these people, and I'm not willing to shut them out.
I just want to, again, kind of applaud the city and the folks who have had the foresight to really ask the developers to take a pause for a second and really work through this planning effort, because it's intentionally ambitious, because there are a lot of needs that we're trying to address. in multiple planning fronts, and I think it's a great opportunity to try to incorporate with our best effort those priorities that we've established as a community to try to address. So try to take a positive spin with it. I think it's a great opportunity, and I hope all of you continue to be engaged in that opportunity, and so we can put our best foot forward and allow a platform for development that helps us achieve some of the objectives we've laid out.
The other reason you can't say no to development is because most of the land is privately owned now, and the people who own their land have the right to develop their land unless we have a city system for buying all their land and keeping it for the public. And so it's not a question of whether it can be developed, it's a question of how it will be developed.
Time for a few more. This could be for any of you as well. What efforts or community meetings are planned to get input from the Hispanic community? I suppose this could be for any of your organizations that you represent as well.
Well, I know the city of Hood River is considering doing something called Oregon's Kitchen Table. It's a project run by Oregon Consensus, and it seeks to get voices in local government that aren't generally heard. And we definitely have a deficit of Hispanic voices in the conversation around planning. And so I hope that the city makes a good effort to engage that community.
Next question is, we have a growing trend of quote unquote walling off via fencing front yards and protests from neighbors who don't want quote unquote affordable housing or PUDs next to them. How can we do more to educate and encourage a welcoming spirit? Rules on fence height in front yards, more parks and open spaces in areas where people can walk easily. Any thoughts about that? That's like 5 different questions. I'm just reading the card, Mike.
I'm not sure how to answer a lot of that, but I always said that PUDs have their place, high density pocket neighborhoods have their place, but I don't think they should be piled on top of each other. I think it's appropriate to have them in every other neighborhood or here and there with green space in between, and it would be up to the developer to make the PUD as so attractive that the neighbor wouldn't want to put a fence up to hide themselves from it.
Right.
I just mentioned, I think that we as a community, we have kind of a fear of unknowns, and we haven't seen much of what we're kind of planning for in Hood River. So there's really kind of a fear of an unknown. And from personal experience, I can't remember the last development we've done where we haven't had neighbors that are worried about what we're doing. And they want to learn more. And they may even be angry about the development that we're proposing that may be close to them. I also can't remember a development that hasn't been finished that we've worked on where we haven't had neighbors come back to us and said, wow, I thank you for this, and I'm glad that it was able to go through because I think it's a great benefit to the community. So I think we're always going to have that dialogue, and I think that dialogue is great. And I think the more that we, again, create that platform that allows the more different housing types to occur, I think we're going to start seeing that it's okay. It can be part of our community.
I'm also, when I started working with this Aging in the Gorge Alliance, we had a number of committees. The committees needed heads. So I was appointed to head the housing committee. Not my area of expertise. But, so I was on a learning curve, and one of the things I was interested in is particularly federally subsidized housing. What is affordable housing for low income look like? So I went to Joel mainly to pick his brain, but then I decided to take a little look-see at his projects, many of which he showed up here. And it changed my mind about what a federally subsidized housing project in the area might look like. you all have probably driven by the Hood River crossing there across from Les Schwab on Cascade. If you have a moment, or anyone who would have a concern about the appearance of that kind of a project, just stop the car and walk back in there. It's lovely. I mean, I would be quite happy to live in such a place, let alone have it near me. So, and those examples in the Dalles and in Hood River are readily available to us. So, and in fact, Joel has had open houses at these places, not just when they're open, but I think that's a good idea when, you know, to allay some of the concern about what are we talking about.
What about income sources? Because that's the thing that we keep talking about, the demand for affordability, when I don't see that we have the income sources here for people that have the incomes to live here. The numbers up there show that Hood River population is growing faster than the state of Oregon.
So the question is,
Where are the employers coming from?
for the people who have low incomes?
I don't know. I wish.
I'll throw out that to pick out one employer, in situ has an open list of jobs available that is more than 30 jobs. And I want to say much more than 30 because I'm talking out of my back pocket and I have no interior information. I want to say there are jobs at that level available. There are service jobs available. Obviously, every door I walk through is asking for people to work there. And others. I know the hospital and the school district are hiring every year.
construction.
Just in terms of people building walls and not knowing and not wanting to know who's moving in next to them. No, I haven't read the entire plan, so maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't heard one time mentioned what's going to happen to Hood River with the Cascadia subduction zone, and how the biggest likelihood of a community that survives a catastrophe like that is neighbors knowing neighbors. And so if we can start talking about that a lot more, and how everybody brings something to the table. Maybe that person has a chainsaw and that person can make really good beer from their garage. We're all going to need to help each other through what's about to happen.
We're going to be able to kite out of here. Okay, well, we are out of time for this section. Didn't get to every question. However, the members of the panel will be here as well, lingering, I hope, for a couple minutes to answer any other questions. Yes?
We're going to collate the questions you asked, the questions that people wrote out in the lobby, and other ones we didn't get to. We're going to make sure that all those questions are delivered to you.
Great.
As part of the process.
Great. All right, I do have some closing comments.